The film opens with the 9/11 attacks and America's stand on Afghanistan. We see 23 or more Koreans being abducted by the Taliban in Afghanistan. They take them hostage and publicly demand that the Korean government let Taliban prisoners go and retreat Korean soldiers from Afghanistan in exchange for the hostages. Diplomat Jung Jae-ho from Korea was sent to Afghanistan to negotiate with the Afghan government and help release Taliban prisoners to save the Koreans. At the same time, NISA agent Park Da-sik was released from Pakistan prison and sent to Afghanistan to help release the hostages. While Jae-ho is a diplomat who thinks of solving things diplomatically, Da-sik is a risk-taker who uses any means to get the job done. Both of them meet in Afghanistan, and Jae-ho ignores Da-sik and refuses to share intel with him. Jae-ho meets the Afghani minister and promises to extend the stay of Korean troops if he can release the prisoners and help save the hostages. The Afghani minister agrees. Da-sik warns Jae-ho that he knows nothing about the country and that the Taliban will not be easy to deal with. The Afghani minister held a press conference and publicly said he wouldn't release the prisoners but find other ways to help the hostages. Jae-ho is baffled by this and confronts the minister. The minister tells him that he and his fellow citizens had to deal with the Taliban after they left, so these were hard times with more challenging decisions. Da-sik finds a Korean man living in Afghanistan with a different identity speaking the local language. He takes his help and meets with a royal family that even the Taliban cannot harm. To Da-sik's surprise, Jae-ho meets the royal family to negotiate. They team up and convince the group chief to help the hostages. The following day, news broke out that the Taliban were going to release the hostage, but the celebrations were short-lived. A Korean news broadcasting station revealed that the hostages weren't volunteers but missionaries and had signed a will before going to Afghanistan. After hearing the news, the group's chief refuses to help them as he feels disrespected by being lied to. After the first plan failed, Da-sik came in contact with a man named Abdullah Amir, who said that he could broker a deal between them and the Taliban and help their cause if they paid him $2 million. Abdullah seemed like a well-connected man, and he said that he could get the 23 Taliban prisoners released by hook or by crook. Da-sik and Jae-ho convinced their bosses, and with not a lot of options left, they agreed to work with Abdullah. Just when they thought that the nightmare would finally be over, they got intel that Abdullah was a fraud and that he just wanted to take the money and flee away. Jae-ho was smart enough to tell one of his officers to conduct a background check on the man, and that's how Abdullah's lies got caught. Once again, the plan was a failure, but Da-sik managed to not let the fraudsters take that sum of $2 million. The Korean government lost its patience, and they decided to retaliate by launching an attack on the Taliban forces. Jae-ho knew that it was a terrible idea, as, for years, even the Americans hadn't been able to penetrate that territory. Jae-ho told the foreign minister and all his superiors that they were putting the hostages at risk, but nobody heard him, and additionally, he was asked to go back home as his services were no longer needed. Jae-ho felt responsible for those Koreans, and his conscience was just not allowing him to leave the battlefield. He tried convincing his superiors, but to no avail. He was packing his bags and leaving for his flight when suddenly he called the chief presidential secretary and asked him to allow him to negotiate with the Taliban leaders face-to-face. Jae-ho knew what he was signing into was a suicide mission, but he was willing to give his life if it came to that. His request was turned down at first because the nation's policy was that they did not negotiate with terrorists, but then the president himself gave Jae-ho a call. The president asked him what the odds were that the mission would be successful, and Jae-ho truthfully said that the possibility was quite bleak, but still, it was worth the shot. The president agreed to it, and together with Qasim and Da-sik, Jae-ho got ready to face his biggest nightmare, the Taliban soldiers. The Taliban soldiers did not allow Da-sik to be a part of the negotiations, and Jae-ho and Qasim were left with no option but to go alone. Jae-ho wanted to make it very clear that firstly, he was not afraid, and secondly, he was not going to be subdued during the negotiations. He dared to tell the leader to prove that he was in charge of things by releasing 3 captives. The leader released 2 Korean citizens, but then made an alteration in his demand and said that now he wanted all the Taliban prisoners to be released. Obviously, Jae-ho knew that it wasn't going to be possible, and in that extremely nerve-wracking moment, he came up with a plan. Jae-ho knew that the Koreans would start bombing the area after they learned that the Taliban were making such unreasonable demands. As soon as the bombing started, Jai-ho told the leader that the Allies just wanted an excuse to go all out and that the leader had given them that chance by not releasing the hostages. Jai-ho said that if he thought that it was a rescue mission, then he was wrong because the Allies were going to kill everybody present at the hidden site. Jai-ho's words had an impact on the Taliban leader, and he actually bought his story that the Korean government was ready to sacrifice their citizens just so that they were able to completely destroy the Taliban forces. In the end, Jai-ho's courage paid off, and the Taliban decided to release all the Korean prisoners in return for $20 million. At the end of the point men, the Taliban said that they would hold one person back just to make sure that the Allies were not tricking them once again. Da-sik volunteered to stay back, but luckily, he was released later. Jai-ho went back to South Korea with the missionaries, and Da-sik decided to stay back and work his way around. Da-sik didn't have anybody in his life, and he always said that he didn't have a home to go back to like the others. Jai-ho and Da-sik had not only learned to respect one another, but they also became friends and grew quite close to each other. When Da-sik called after the entire fiasco was over to tell Jai-ho that he was safe, Jai-ho told him that from now on, he should never feel that he didn't have a home. Maybe Jai-ho and Da-sik would once again cross each other's path during some other mission in future, but until then they could at least sleep peacefully knowing the fact that their efforts had paid off and there were people who were alive only because of them. That's all for this video. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification for more amazing content. Thanks for watching.